Hello and welcome to The Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, after 60 years as an independent nation, Africa remains the cornerstone of Nigeria's foreign policy. But after 6 decades of fits and starts with serious diplomatic rows with Ghana and South Africa over their treatment of Nigerians and defiant disapprovals from Abuja, should Nigeria's foreign policy thrust undergo a serious rethink and perhaps be reshaped into a Nigeria First approach? We'll speak to 2 leading Nigerian members of the U.S. International Visitors Leadership Program who are organizing a webinar on what Nigeria's foreign policy objectives should be 60 years on. And later, after months of shadow boxing, the 2 U.S. presidential candidates come face to face tonight in the first of 3 television debates. It could be a turning point in the campaign as tens of millions of Americans tune in to see Donald Trump and Joe Biden go head-to-head in Cleveland, Ohio. We'll speak to a leading Democrat who's also the former media director of the U.S. Commission on Presidential Debates, the group that's organizing tonight's main event. Coming up. Now, after 60 years of independence, a significant part of which was dominated by military rule, Nigeria's foreign policy, driven by its domestic position, has oscillated between a position of regard and esteem in the international community to something of a pariah nation. There's been everything really on the foreign policy table, from the independence and anti-apartheid movements of the 60s and 70s to regional stability and peacekeeping efforts in Sierra Leone and Liberia in the 80s and 90s, and now in the noughties, everything from White House travel restrictions to South African xenophobic violence and the forced closure of Nigerian businesses in Ghana. As Abuja dispatches diplomatic worded communications, facing down neighbors, expressing serious disappointment and threatening retaliation, a growing school of thought is advocating adapting Nigeria's foreign policy away from the traditional concentric rings of neighbors, West Africa, Africa, and the world to Nigeria's own evolving political interests and the prevailing global geopolitical winds. We'll talk about all that in a moment, but first, here's Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyeama, speaking on Arise News about the changing shape of Nigeria's foreign policy.
Nigeria is more important. And how do you test this, or how do you measure this? The best way is how you're seen by others, by other countries. And if you look at the last, since President Muhammadu Buhari became president, he has been invited to China, to France, Paris, to the UK, to Washington, to Moscow. That in itself is a sign of the importance of a country, because the big countries, the major countries, want you to come and visit. And who's been coming here? And Germany, of course, where he's also invited. And at one time, you saw almost in a week, the UK Prime Minister was here, the German Prime Minister was here. And so Nigeria's importance is still there. And what makes Nigeria important, as we're concerned really now, we want to be an economic power, okay? Not by dint of the fact that we produce 2.2 billion barrels of petroleum, but we want to be an economic power through productivity of our people. We want to generate wealth, within our country.
Geoffrey Onyeama, Nigeria's foreign minister there. Well, for more on Nigeria's evolving foreign policy, I'm joined now in the studio by Lanre Osho, the immediate past president of the U.S. International Visitor Leadership Program Alumni Association in Nigeria. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. I didn't know I could get to the end of that one, because that's quite a long thing, but a very important organization, isn't it?
Thanks, Charles. Very important organization, existing for the past 80 years. And connecting nations, developing leaders, and transforming, communities.
And one of the reasons you're here is because you're organizing a webinar on precisely what we're talking about today. That webinar is going to take place on the Thursday, the 1st of October, and it's about Nigeria's evolving foreign policy.
Absolutely, you're right. The program is to commemorate Nigeria's 60th independence anniversary, and it will be taking place on Thursday, which is our Independence Day, at 2 p.m. The topic, as you have rightly said, is promise of independence and Nigerians' foreign policy. When you talk about foreign policy, every nation structures foreign policy with bias for self-interest. So the fulcrum, the center point of your foreign policy should be what's in it for me. Sadly, if you trace the history of Nigerian foreign policy, our foreign policy has been Big Brother Africa. So with Big Brother Africa, we went to South Africa, and Nigeria was called a non-aligned nation member. We took part in what happened in Rhodesia, later became Zimbabwe. We were actively involved in Namibia with Sam, Nujoma, and so on and so forth. And we squandered billions of naira in trying to show fellow Africans that we got your back, we're your brothers, we care what you're going through. But in doing all this, we did not factor the self-interest, ethos into it. If we have done that, as we're giving money out, we're getting something back in exchange, even though we're doing it for our brothers. And you saw what the Americans did in Iraq.
Well, I was just going to say that this sounds incredibly like Donald Trump. I mean, in the sense that, well, perhaps not quite as marked as Donald Trump, but I mean, the fact that what you're saying is pretty much the same argument that Donald Trump's making. And of course, your leadership program is US sponsored. I mean,
I'm not surprised that you see a correlation between, what Donald Trump is preaching, although there's a little difference between that actually, because the US became the global, the most powerful nation in the whole world, watching the back of so many other people. And Trump, when he came into presidency, he saw that, look, some of our interests are lacking. We can't police the whole world, and our country is falling apart.
So he started the America First thing.
First.
And in a nutshell, what you're advocating is Nigeria first.
Nigeria first, because you see, if you do not watch your back, no one will do. If you do not seek your self-interest, no one will do. And you see the fallout all over the place. Xenophobia in South Africa, Ghanaians closing Nigerian company down, and then, in all over the place. Even Libya, you saw what happened to Nigerians in Libya. So, it's time to take, we are the biggest country in Africa, no doubt about that. We are the most populous country in Africa, no doubt about that. But charity begins at home. So if you're going to wash, if you're going to sanctify and sanitize my environment, I'm going to look at how clean yours, is. And we see it all over the place because of our foreign interest that does not factor our engineers into building roads in Sierra Leone when we were doing, liberating Sierra Leone, factoring our doctors, our nurses, our businessmen, being given better quota in Liberia, and so on and so forth. So
as a condition
for
liberating
them. So
that's the least you can do.
We have millions of our youth not employed, and these same people are putting fingers in our faces.
That's a very, very interesting point that you raised there. The other thing that I noticed from the notes that I got from your one of your webinar organizers is that you're also suggesting that a substantial part of Nigeria's foreign policy should be dedicated to improving the country's external image.
The issue of Nigeria's external image has been come see, come sa. You did allude to the fact that we became a pariah nation. This issue of pariah nation has been in and out. During the time of Babangida Abacha, we became a pariah nation. During the time of Obasanjo, he seemed to have put some right foot in right places, and then we became a country that could lift our shoulder, stand toe to toe with our competitors across the world, and flex a little muscle. And then down after Yaradua, then after Jonathan. You see, if you don't have good governance in your country, it's going to reflect on the economy, and then your people are going to be scattered all over the world. Like I told somebody yesterday, and Nigerians are taking one-way ticket now to Canada. Now, do you think our image is going to go up in Canada or come down? Because you see us, running everywhere, escaping from our own country, escaping from our own reality, escaping from our own leaders. So going forward, what we're advocating right now is the right thing to do.
So really going back to 1960,
Yes.
which is the starting point. Essentially, and also the starting point of your webinar, basically. You want to kind of retrospectively look at Nigeria since independence. I mean, at that point, Nigeria, from a foreign policy perspective, was seen as a responsible and respected member of the international community, wasn't it? What do you think went wrong?
A lot of things went wrong, and if you look at the way that theme was structured, promise of independence. Now, when you listen to Tafawa Balewa speak English, when you listen to Nnamdi Azikiwe, eloquently make his point, when you listen to Obafemi Awolowo, at that time, 60 years ago, you have no choice than to respect Nigeria. We were a country, we were able to articulate what we want. And then when you look at the economy, per capita income of a Nigerian as at that time was way above South Korea, way above Malaysia, way above, our contemporaries, even Singapore. But, we kept falling down the ladder. And the more we fall down the ladder, the more we lose, respect. And then the more we even lose self-esteem. And we cannot own our homes among our mates across the world. So there are so many things that we need to look at. Number one, governance. It was this bickering stuff that led to the wet hair.
And of course, the crucial point there is that when you talk about governance, I mean, the important point that I assume you're making is that the domestic vision of the country and the domestic affairs of the country is what actually informs its foreign policy. So if you're all right, I mean, you've got to get your domestic house in order in order to have an effective foreign policy.
Absolutely, absolutely. The quality of leadership determines the quality of, development. Now, this determines the image, the respect that you have across the world. Now, look at UAE, for example. 16, 17 years ago, where was UAE? Suddenly, Dubai emerged. Abu Dhabi emerged. Ajman emerged. And each of these cities receiving 40 million visitors from all over the world. And they say, wow, this place is more beautiful than our own country. So they're going to look for opportunities, going to look for business. Respect is going to go up. But even for us, when we were doing the liberation we were doing in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Namibia, and our brothers in Africa were wondering, who are these angels who are redeeming us, who are coming to our rescue? And then Nollywood came on the scene, and Nollywood showed clips of our beautiful part of Lagos and here and there, and they want to rush to Nigeria. And when they came to Lagos, what did they find? When they come to our states, what do they find? Well, underdevelopment, no roads, no infrastructure.
We're going to have to talk about this some other time, or perhaps continue the chat with your colleague who's going to come in here right now. But I want to thank you very much indeed for the time you've taken to talk to us. And Lanre Osho is the immediate past president of the U.S. International Visitor Leadership Program Alumni Association in Nigeria. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our reflections about the direction of Nigeria's foreign policy. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, the United States International Visitors Leadership Program here in Nigeria is organizing a webinar on October the 1st, Nigeria's Independence Day, that's taking a critical look at the history and trajectory of Nigeria's foreign policy in the last 60 years. It's a webinar that's open to the public, and the aim is to reflect on why Nigeria's image, for instance, seems to be at perhaps its lowest level since independence, and has become something of a lumbering regional power of dubious international clout, a far cry from when it was, say, in the 60s, 70s and 80s, as an important player on the regional, continental and world stage. What has happened to that economic clout, investment flows and military capability that earned the country a place at the global table? And with me in the studio, Chibuike Mbgeahuruike, who is a member of the IVLPAA Foreign Affairs and Diplomatic Cluster here in Abuja. I thought I'd abbreviate it this time because it was... Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Good to be here.
I was talking to your colleague just before the break, and I will put the same question to you. How important is it for Nigeria to get its domestic act together in order to make its foreign policy more effective? What's the correlation between the two?
Yeah, that's $1 million question. Honestly, you cannot separate the two. Like you earlier alluded, I think if we don't stand for something, the tendency is for us to fall for anything. I think the domestic affairs rules the external. And talking about respect for nationals or nationalities, I think it is the measure of value you have for yourself that will determine how others will treat you out there. And it's been a while we've been suffering. You know, it's a sad commentary for Nigeria that in that particular measure, we have not had it good. Because we attribute little to ourselves, we value ourselves very little, and so we don't expect magic out there. And so any part of the globe you go to, people treat you from the point of view of to what extent do you have respect for yourself and your citizenry. So I think there's a very close, the connection is widespread, and you can also say it is about leadership. The previous webinar we hosted, the first edition was about leadership and followership and how it actually played out during the COVID-19 issues. And so coming from there, if we get our leadership right, it will trickle down to the attitude of citizenry. And then when you travel with pride, because every country has a flag, and something come out of that flag. There's this air of importance that comes out of it. If you see a Nigerian flag abroad, you will feel like from Nigeria. But you see, so far, if we are not doing well at home, the tendency for you is to even deny your national.
Right.
And we may have seen that much.
But can it also go the other way? Because here you've got this terrible image that you're talking about that has a deleterious effect on the citizens. Can that international foreign environment have an impact on the domestic environment? Because, as you said, it's making a lot of Nigerians feel very bad. So can that also have an effect, a transformative effect, is what I mean?
It does have a lot of effect. Because if you look at our relationship, by the way, the reason we are here is because of our relationship with the US. Okay, this leadership program was a kind of opportunity for us to emulate others where we don't have it all, to exchange ideas on leadership and others.
That's the United States International Visitors Leadership Program, of which you're a member.
Exactly.
Right.
If America can go that far to recognize us and to nominate us for that program, there must be something. We have had a long-term relationship that has flourished over time. The relationship between that is, if we are being treated, with respect outside. Whichever way we are treated, you will always blame the home front. Because if we have a poor leadership that has little or no respect for the citizenry, you will go out there either in search of greener pastures, not because you have something to offer. My colleague alluded earlier that people are running away from poor leadership, where you can be respected. There's something I noticed when I went to the US. What is it? Is the least citizen that is contributing the least to the nation has as much respect as the president of this country.
Everybody feels they've got a stake in the country. But let me ask you this, because I think your colleague previously also touched on this, because, Professor Ibrahim Gambari's theory of foreign policy concentric rings, that where, you drop a pebble in a pool and there are rings going out. remains this country's modus operandi, doesn't it? I mean, the idea that Nigeria's foreign policy is executed on the basis of priority concentric circles, starting with its immediate neighbors, then the West African sub-region, then the African continent, then the rest of the world. Does that properly serve Nigeria's national interest in today's world?
Today, I doubt that. But you see, I've monitored Nigerians' foreign policy dynamics over time, during the Murtala period, Obasanjo period, and then now. I mean, those days, you can even begin to analyze this is Nigerians' position on every issue. But today, I cannot tell you with certainty that this is our position in some certain developments that has international bearing. You may not know, because the truth is that's why I said if we don't stand for something, the tendency is to fall for anything. We should be able to build a blueprint of our own foreign policy.
So basically, the point you're making is that you're saying, let me just be clear on that, that Nigeria's foreign policy used to be consistent in its pro-African thrust.
Exactly.
But that has changed now. I mean, you've had military leaders, civilian leaders come and go, and it's no longer clear what it is.
It's no longer clear, yes. It used to be, I mean, our adventure in South Africa, in Liberia, and the rest of other countries had some they had some focus. I mean, there's something we wanted to restore peace.
Yeah, but obviously it's a different era now. But what are you suggesting, that Nigeria is no longer focused on ECOWAS and the African Union and all the rest of it as a major, or that its position has diminished?
It has diminished. We are more reactive.
Right.
You see, if you check very well, you see that some other African countries that are supposed to be looking up to us, most of the time are actually ahead of us. You understand? If like my colleague earlier alluded, that if we are the so-called big brother and people are comfortable with our leadership at some point, and now people wait for us to respond to issues at the occur, we are no longer proactive, we are no longer on top of the situation. But what we have been enjoying so far, I mean, I don't know whether you call it old glory or whatever it is, but the truth is that we are larger than life in our image, I mean, so to speak. People still, that is what is still, the little respect we still have.
Right, people still have expectations. But they keep getting disappointed in those expectations.
Consistently.
Right.
Consistently. And sometimes they voice it out. Oh, we are not playing along, we are not coming at the right time, we are coming late in the day.
So we've got about a minute before we end the chat. What do you think should happen now?
Yeah, what I think is, apart from the fact that what the essence of this webinar is also to begin to focus more attention on the citizenry, whether they are in Nigeria or abroad, let the leadership begin to look at issues differently. Let us begin to restore the pride of place for every Nigerian. Wherever you are, you will have some pride. And that's what America are known for. You understand? You don't just say because a Nigerian is being intimidated out there, whatever is labeled, you will key in with them. You must first and foremost interrogate the situation, and then use your position to engender peace and harmony.
Right, okay.
And then, I mean, if we do that, we will come back to that situation.
Chibuike Mbgeahuruike, member of the IVLPAA Foreign Affairs and Diplomatic Cluster here in Abuja. Thank you very much indeed.